At 2023 hours on December 6, 1942, Squadron Leader Reggie Reynolds crouched in the cockpit of his de Havilland Mosquito bomber at RAF Marham, Norfolk, watching German flak light up the sky over Eindhoven. 29 years old, 217 flight hours in Mosquitos, 0 decorated missions. The Germans had fortified the Phillips radio and valve works with 47 anti-aircraft guns, each one designed to tear wooden aircraft from the night sky. Reynolds had enlisted in the RAF in 1937, trained as a bomber pilot, spent 2 years flying obsolete Bristol Blenheims that bled crews faster than they could be replaced. Now he commanded 139 Squadron, flying an aircraft the Air Ministry had called useless. An aircraft built from plywood and balsa wood that every expert said would never survive combat. Tonight, he would prove them wrong. Or he would die trying. The mission was Operation Oyster. The target was the most important electronics factory in occupied Europe. 94 aircraft, Mosquitos and Venturas, ordered to destroy the facility that produced 40% of Germany's radio valves, 60% of their radar tubes, and 100% of their submarine communications equipment. German intelligence knew the factory was a target. They had ringed it with guns, searchlights, and 3 squadrons of Focke-Wulf FW. 190 fighters at nearby Göring airfield, 12 miles north. The Germans were ready, but they were expecting a night raid by heavy bombers. Lancasters and Halifaxes flying at 20,000 feet, dropping bombs from above the clouds where precision was impossible. Instead, Air Vice Marshal Basil Embry had sent Mosquitos, wooden aircraft that could fly at 380 miles per hour at sea level, carrying 2 500-pound bombs each, crewed by 2 men who would see their targets with their own eyes. Reynolds checked his watch. 2,205 hours, 2 minutes to bomb release. His navigator, pilot officer Edward Sismore, sat beside him in the cramped cockpit. The Mosquito's fuselage was 12 feet wide, barely room for 2 men sitting shoulder to shoulder, looking through a clear perspex nose that gave them an unobstructed view of the hell ahead. Sismore had the bombing calculations ready: altitude 1,500 feet, airspeed 320 miles per hour, bomb delay 11 seconds. The delays were critical. If the bombs exploded on impact, the blast would destroy the Mosquito that dropped them. 11 seconds gave each aircraft time to escape before the 500-pounders detonated. Reynolds pushed the throttles forward. The 2 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines roared. The same engines that powered Spitfires and Lancasters, 1,460 horsepower each, driving the Mosquito through the night at speeds no German fighter could match at low altitude. The Mosquito climbed to 1,500 feet and turned toward Eindhoven. Behind Reynolds, 93 other aircraft followed. 10 Mosquitos from 105 Squadron, 18 from 139 Squadron, and 66 Lockheed Venturas from 464, 487, and 21 Squadrons. The Venturas were slower, heavier, American-built bombers, crewed by New Zealanders and Australians. They would hit the factory's administrative buildings and worker housing. The Mosquitos would destroy the production halls. At 22:07 hours, German radar detected the formation 40 miles west of Eindhoven. Air raid sirens howled across the city. Civilians ran for shelters. Factory workers evacuated the Phillips complex, 3,000 men and women scrambling into basements and tunnels. At WWII airfield, FW-19s scrambled. Their engines screamed as they lifted off, climbing to intercept the bombers they assumed would be at altitude. Instead, the Mosquitos came in at 1,500 feet, below the effective range of most flak guns. Too low for fighters to dive on them without risking ground collision. If you want to see how Reynolds and his wooden Mosquito survived the most heavily defended factory in Europe, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because what happens next changed the entire war. Back to Reynolds. The Phillips factory appeared ahead, massive brick buildings covering 900,000 square feet. 4 production halls, each one 3 stories tall, chimneys belching smoke even at night. The Germans ran 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, churning out radio valves and radar tubes that kept U-boats communicating, kept fighters vectoring onto bomber streams, kept the Wehrmacht coordinating across a 1,000-mile front. Reynolds identified Building A, the main valve production hall. His target. Sizemore counted down. 10 seconds to release. 5 seconds. Release. Reynolds pulled the bomb release lever. 2 500-pound bombs dropped from the Mosquito's bomb bay. The aircraft lurched upward, suddenly 1,000 pounds lighter. Reynolds banked hard left, maximum G-force, the wooden wings creaking under the strain. 11 seconds. The bombs struck Building A's roof and punched through. 11 seconds later, both detonated inside the production hall. The explosion blew out every window on the south side. Fire erupted from the roof. Reynolds was already 2 miles away, racing west at 380 miles per hour, low enough that his propellers kicked up spray from the Dommel River. Behind him, the other Mosquitos followed the same pattern. Dive to 1,500 feet, identify target, release bombs, escape at maximum speed. The entire attack lasted 4 minutes. 28 Mosquitos dropped 56 bombs. Then the Venturas arrived. 66 aircraft at 3,000 feet, bombing through the smoke and fire the Mosquitos had created. They dropped 270 bombs, 500-pounders and incendiaries, carpet bombing the factory complex. The Germans threw everything at them. 47 anti-aircraft guns opened fire simultaneously. Flak filled the sky. Black bursts at 3,000 feet, shrapnel tearing through aluminum fuselages. The FW-19s arrived at 22:15 hours, diving on the Venturas. The Venturas had gun turrets, .303 caliber machine guns that returned fire, but the FW-190s were faster, more maneuverable, equipped with 20mm cannons that could tear a bomber apart with 3 hits. 9 Venturas went down. 14 more limped home with battle damage. But the Mosquitos were gone. All 28 had escaped before the fighters arrived. Reynolds landed at Marham at 23:42 hours. His Mosquito had taken no hits, no battle damage, no casualties. Sizemore climbed out of the cockpit, legs shaking from adrenaline. He asked Reynolds if the bombs had hit. Reynolds said he had seen the explosions, seen the fire, but they would need reconnaissance photos to assess damage. The photos came 3 days later. RAF Spitfires equipped with cameras flew over Eindhoven on December 9th at 1400 hours. They made 3 passes at 25,000 feet, cameras clicking every 2 seconds. The developed film showed devastation beyond what anyone had expected. Building A, the main valve production hall, was completely destroyed. The roof had collapsed inward, crushing machinery worth millions of Reichsmarks. Walls remained standing, but the interior was gutted by fire that had burned for 14 hours before Dutch fire brigades got it under control. Building B, the assembly hall, where workers soldered components onto circuit boards, was 70% damaged. The eastern section had collapsed completely. The western section stood but was unusable, filled with debris and smoke damage. Building C, the testing facility where completed radios and radar units underwent quality control checks, suffered 40% damage, enough to halt testing operations for months. Administrative offices, where engineers kept blueprints and production schedules, were destroyed completely. Every document, every schematic, every production order burned. The Germans would have to reconstruct their entire manufacturing process from memory and whatever duplicate records existed in Berlin. Worker housing on the factory grounds sustained 30% damage. 14 buildings destroyed, 148 Dutch civilians killed, 327 injured. The human cost was terrible, but the strategic impact was even greater. Philips Radio and Valve Works, the most important electronics factory in occupied Europe, was offline. German production of radio valves dropped 50% in January 1943. Radar tube production dropped 40%. The Kriegsmarine reported critical shortages of submarine communications equipment. Luftwaffe night fighter squadrons faced radar component delays. And the RAF learned something critical. Wooden Mosquitos flown at low altitude by two-man crews could destroy targets that required hundreds of heavy bombers and hundreds of casualties. Operation Oyster proved the concept, but the Air Ministry still doubted. One successful raid did not validate an entire aircraft type. The Mosquito was expensive to build, required skilled woodworkers, consumed balsa wood that could be used for other purposes, and it violated every bomber doctrine the RAF had developed since 1918. Bombers needed defensive armament. The Mosquito had none. Bombers needed altitude to escape fighters. The Mosquito flew at rooftop level. Bombers needed large crews to man guns, navigate, and drop bombs. The Mosquito had 2 men and relied on speed alone for survival. Then came January 30th, 1943. The 10th anniversary of Adolf Hitler's rise to power. Germany declared it a national holiday. Hermann Göring, Reichsmarshal of the Luftwaffe, scheduled a speech at the Air Ministry in Berlin. Live broadcast on German radio. 1100 hours. Every radio in Germany would be tuned to Göring's voice, celebrating a decade of Nazi rule. Air Vice Marshal Don Bennett had a better idea. At 0849 hours on January 30th, 1943, 3 Mosquitos from 105 Squadron took off from RAF Marham. Pilots, Squadron Leader Reggie Reynolds, Flight Lieutenant James Gordon, Flying Officer Anthony Wickham, Navigators, Pilot Officer Edward Sismore, Flying Officer Ronald Hayes, Pilot Officer William Macon. Target, Berlin. 600 miles from England, the most heavily defended city in Europe, ringed with 400 flak guns and patrolled by 120 fighters. The mission was absurd. 3 wooden aircraft attacking the capital of the Third Reich in broad daylight. But the Mosquitos could do what no other aircraft could do. Fly to Berlin and back without refueling. Fly at 380 miles per hour at 28,000 feet. Where WWIIs struggled to catch them. Fly with 2-man crews, meaning if all 3 were shot down, the RAF would lose 6 men instead of 21. Reynolds crossed the English coast at 0902 hours and turned southeast toward the Dutch border. The 3 Mosquitos flew in loose formation 2 miles apart, each aircraft independent, but close enough for mutual support if German fighters appeared. The North Sea below was gray, choppy, January winds, kicking up white caps that stretched to the horizon. The Mosquitos flew at 50 feet above the water, low enough that spray occasionally hit the Perspex nose. Below German radar coverage, invisible to the Freya stations that lined the Dutch coast. At this altitude, the margin for error was 0. One mistake, 1 moment of inattention, and a Mosquito would cartwheel into the sea at 300 miles per hour, leaving nothing but debris and oil slick. Reynolds kept his eyes on the altimeter, on the horizon, on the instruments. Sismore watched the clock, calculating their position by dead reckoning. No radio navigation, radio silence maintained until they were over target. At 0947 hours, they reached the Dutch coast near Katwijk and climbed to 28,000 feet. The sudden altitude change hit like a hammer. Reynolds felt his ears pop, felt the temperature drop from 45 degrees Fahrenheit at sea level to -40 at altitude. The Mosquito's cockpit had minimal heating, just warm air ducted from the engines, not enough to fight off the cold at 28,000 feet. German radar detected them immediately. 3 high-speed contacts heading east, altitude 28,000 feet, speed 380 miles per hour. The Germans scrambled fighters from Gilserion, Leeuwarden, and Schiphol. 18 FW-19s climbed to intercept, but the Mosquitos were already past them, racing inland at maximum speed. The FW-19s could climb to 28,000 feet, but it took them 11 minutes. By then, the Mosquitos were 70 miles ahead, crossing into Germany near Münster. At 10:53 hours, Reynolds saw Berlin ahead. Cloud cover at 15,000 feet, broken layers. The city was visible through gaps. He could see the Reichstag, the Brandenburg Gate, the Air Ministry building on Wilhelmstrasse. Göring was inside, speaking to 3,000 Nazi officials. His speech, broadcast live on every German radio station. Reynolds descended to 20,000 feet and armed the bombs. 2 500-pounders in the bomb bay. Sizemore calculated the bombing solution. Wind speed, 25 knots from the northwest. Ground speed, 390 miles per hour. Altitude, 20,000 feet. Release in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Release. Reynolds pulled the bomb release lever. The Mosquito lurched upward. Reynolds banked hard right, diving away from Berlin at maximum speed. Behind him, the 2 other Mosquitos dropped their bombs. 6 500-pound bombs fell through 20,000 feet of air and struck central Berlin at 1100 hours. Precisely the moment Göring began speaking. The explosions were heard inside the Air Ministry building. The microphones picked up the sound. Every German listening to the broadcast heard it. Göring stopped speaking mid-sentence. German audio engineers panicked. They cut the broadcast and played recorded music for 45 minutes while Göring waited for the all-clear. When Göring returned to the microphone at 11:45 hours, he was furious. He ranted about British bombers, about the Luftwaffe's failure to stop them, about the humiliation of being interrupted by wooden aircraft. Later that day, Joseph Goebbels was scheduled to speak at the Berlin Sportpalast. 1600 hours, live broadcast. 3 more Mosquitos from 139 Squadron arrived at 1600 hours and bombed Berlin again. Goebbels continued speaking through the explosions, but his voice was drowned out by air raid sirens. The German people heard it all. The Nazis' 10th anniversary, ruined by 6 wooden bombers crewed by 12 men. Göring demanded answers. How had wooden bombers reached Berlin in daylight? How had they evaded 120 fighters and 400 flak guns? How had they bombed the capital twice in one day without a single loss? The Luftwaffe had no good answers. The Mosquito was faster than their fighters at altitude. It could fly higher than most flak guns could reach. It was too small a target for mass defenses, and it was made of wood, which German radar struggled to detect. Göring ordered the creation of special fighter units, specifically to hunt Mosquitos. Jagdgeschwader 25 and Jagdgeschwader 50, equipped with souped-up Bf-109 G6 fighters with high-altitude engines and extra fuel tanks. But even these struggled to catch Mosquitos that could see them coming and dive away at 400 miles per hour. The Berlin raid changed everything. The Air Ministry stopped calling the Mosquito useless and started ordering more. Production increased from 50 aircraft per month in January 1943 to 150 per month by June. New squadrons formed: 139 Squadron, 105 Squadron, 627 Squadron, 692 Squadron, 128 Squadron, 571 Squadron, 608 Squadron. By June 1943, the RAF had enough Mosquitos to create the Light Night Striking Force, an entire bomber group dedicated to high-speed, high-altitude night raids over Germany. The concept was simple. 30 to 60 Mosquitos would raid a German city every night, dropping 4,000-pound bombs, the largest bomb a Mosquito could carry. The British called them cookies. The Germans called them blockbusters. A single 4,000-pound cookie could destroy an entire city block. The Mosquitos would bomb from 28,000 feet, where German night fighters could not reach them. They would bomb individually, not in formation, making interception nearly impossible. And they would bomb multiple cities in one night, forcing the Germans to spread their defenses thin. The Light Night Striking Force began operations on June 23, 1943. First target, Berlin. 32 Mosquitos from 139 and 692 squadrons assembled at their dispersal points at RAF Wyton and Marham. Each aircraft carried one 4,000-pound cookie in its bomb bay, a cylindrical high-explosive bomb that looked nothing like a traditional bomb. It resembled a massive steel drum, 8 feet long, 30 inches in diameter, painted dark green with yellow stenciling that read 4,000-pound HC bomb Mk3. The cookie was a blast bomb designed to create maximum overpressure and destroy buildings through shockwave rather than fragmentation. One cookie could collapse every structure within a 100-yard radius, shatter windows a quarter-mile away, and be heard 10 miles away. The Mosquitos took off at 2200 hours, one every 90 seconds, climbing into the summer darkness. They did not fly in formation. Each aircraft navigated independently to Berlin using different routes to confuse German radar. Some flew north over the Baltic, some flew east through central Germany, some flew south through Bavaria before turning north. All converged on Berlin at 2300 hours. They bombed from 28,000 feet, releasing their cookies individually over a 20-minute period, each pilot selecting his own aim point within the city. Some targeted government buildings, some targeted railway stations, some targeted industrial districts. The randomness was intentional, keeping German civil defense forces guessing where the next bomb would fall. 32 cookies dropped across central Berlin between 2300 and 2320 hours, and all 32 Mosquitos returned to England without loss. The Germans scrambled 40 night fighters. None intercepted a Mosquito. The Luftwaffe radar operators could see the Mosquitos on their screens, high-speed contacts at 28,000 feet, but by the time fighters climbed to intercept, the Mosquitos were already over the North Sea, heading home at 380 miles per hour. The Light Night Striking Force hit Berlin again the next night, and the night after that, and the night after that. For 36 consecutive nights, Mosquitos bombed Berlin. Not massive raids like the heavy bomber streams. Small raids, 30 to 60 aircraft, dropping 30 to 60 cookies. But every single night, no break. No rest for German civilians, no sleep for factory workers, who had to report to their shifts exhausted from hiding in bomb shelters all night. The psychological impact was devastating. Berliners called the nightly raids the Mosquito Plage, the Mosquito Plague. Air raid sirens every night at the same time. Explosions every night in different neighborhoods. The unpredictability was worse than the heavy bomber raids. With heavy bombers, you knew when they were coming. The radar gave hours of warning. The Mosquitos gave minutes. German night fighter pilots developed a condition they called Mosquito Schreck, mosquito terror. The fear of being hunted by aircraft you could not catch. The Mosquitos were faster, more maneuverable, and equipped with radar warning receivers that detected German night fighters from 10 miles away. Mosquito crews learned to hunt German night fighters. If a Bf-110 or Ju-88 appeared on their radar, they would dive on it from above, open fire with 4 20mm cannons and 4.303 machine guns, and escape before the German pilot knew what hit him. The Light Night Striking Force flew 28,000 missions between June 1943 and May 1945. They dropped 65,000 tons of bombs on German cities: Berlin, Hamburg, Cologne, Munich, Frankfurt, Stuttgart, Nuremberg, Leipzig, Dresden. Every major city in Germany was hit. Loss rate 0.5%. That meant for every 200 missions, one Mosquito was lost. Compare that to heavy bombers, which lost 5% per mission. For every 20 Lancaster bombers sent to Berlin, one did not return. For every 200 Mosquitos, one did not return. Each Lancaster carried 7 men. Each Mosquito carried 2. The math was simple. Mosquitos saved lives while destroying more targets per aircraft lost than any other bomber in the war. But the Mosquitos did more than drop bombs. They flew as pathfinders, marking targets for heavy bomber streams with colored flares. They flew as intruders, attacking German airfields at night and destroying fighters on the ground. They flew as reconnaissance aircraft, photographing targets before and after raids, and they flew as shipping strike aircraft armed with 57mm cannons that could sink U-boats and destroyers. One Mosquito variant, the FB-6, carried 8 60-pound rockets and 4 20mm cannons. It could destroy a locomotive from 800 yards, punch holes through a destroyer's hull at 1,000 yards, and sink a U-boat on the surface with one rocket salvo. The Banff Strike Wing in Scotland flew FB-6 Mosquitos against German shipping in Norwegian waters. Between January and May 1945, they sank 17 destroyers, 23 U-boats, and 94 cargo ships. The Germans could not move supplies by sea without facing Mosquitos that appeared out of nowhere at twilight, fired rockets, and vanished before coastal guns could respond. The most famous Mosquito raid came on February 18, 1944, Operation Jericho. The target was Amiens prison in northern France. 700 French resistance fighters were imprisoned there, scheduled for execution by the Gestapo. The RAF received intelligence that the executions would begin on February 19th. They had one day to act. Air Vice Marshal Basil Embry assigned the mission to 140 Wing, 18 Mosquito FB-6 fighters from 487 Squadron RNZAF, 464 Squadron RAAF, and 21 Squadron RAF. Each aircraft carried 2 500-pound bombs with 11-second delay fuses. The plan was insane. Fly 300 miles to Amiens at 50 feet to avoid radar, bomb the prison walls at noon to breach them during the guards' lunch break, allowing prisoners to escape in the chaos. But the tactical challenges were enormous. The prison sat in the middle of residential Amiens, surrounded by houses on 3 sides. The walls were 20 feet high, 3 feet thick, built from reinforced concrete designed to keep prisoners in and rescuers out. The target area measured just 300 feet by 400 feet, smaller than a football field. The Mosquitos would approach from the north at 300 miles per hour, giving pilots approximately 3 seconds to line up their bomb run. 3 seconds to identify the correct wall, adjust for wind drift, release bombs at exactly the right moment. Miss by 2 seconds, and the bombs would overshoot into the city. Release too early, and they would hit the houses north of the prison. The bombs themselves were standard 500-pounders with 11-second delay fuses. But the bomb aimers had modified them with instantaneous fuses on the nose. The idea was that the bombs would punch through the prison walls. The instantaneous fuse would detonate the bomb inside the wall, and 11 seconds later the delayed charge would explode, creating a double blast that would pulverize the concrete. In theory. No one had tested this technique. No one had bombed a prison before. No one knew if it would work or if 700 prisoners would die in the rubble. Group Captain Percy Pickard volunteered to lead the mission. Pickard was 28 years old, one of the RAF's most decorated pilots. He had starred in the 1941 propaganda film Target for Tonight, flown 73 combat missions, received the Distinguished Service Order 3 times and the Distinguished Flying Cross once. He knew the mission was nearly impossible. The prison was surrounded by residential buildings. Any bombs that missed the walls would kill French civilians. The target was small, 300 feet by 400 feet. The Mosquitos would bomb from 50 feet at 300 miles per hour, giving pilots 3 seconds to line up their aim. One mistake, and the bombs would hit houses instead of walls. But if they succeeded, 700 resistance fighters would live. Pickard accepted the mission. At 11:01 hours, on February 18, 1944, 18 Mosquitos crossed the French coast at Berck-sur-Mer and turned south toward Amiens. They flew at 50 feet, low enough that their propellers kicked up snow from the fields below. French civilians waved as the Mosquitos passed overhead. German radar did not detect them. At 12:01 hours, the Mosquitos reached Amiens prison. Pickard led the first wave. 6 aircraft from 487 Squadron. They climbed to 500 feet, lined up on the eastern wall, and dove. Pickard released his bombs at 50 feet. Direct hit. The bombs punched through the wall and detonated 11 seconds later. The eastern wall exploded. A 30-foot section collapsed, creating a breach wide enough for men to run through. The other 5 Mosquitos followed, bombing the northern wall. 2 more breaches. Prisoners inside heard the explosions and realized what was happening. They ran for the breaches. Guards opened fire, but the explosions had stunned them. French resistance members inside the prison overpowered guards and seized weapons. The second wave, 6 Mosquitos, from 464 Squadron bombed the guard barracks. Direct hits. The building collapsed, killing or trapping most of the guards inside. The third wave, 6 Mosquitos from 21 Squadron circled overhead as reserves. Pickard radioed them. Attack complete. Return to base. Then German flak opened fire. Pickard's Mosquito was hit. 20mm cannon fire tore through the starboard engine. Smoke poured from the cowling. Pickard tried to gain altitude, but the Mosquito was losing power. He crash-landed in a field 2 miles from the prison. Pickard and his navigator, Flight Lieutenant John Broadley, survived the crash but were shot by German soldiers who reached the wreckage. They were 28 and 26 years old. 2 more Mosquitos were shot down by flak. 4 men killed, including Pickard, but 258 prisoners escaped from Amiens prison. 79 of them were resistance fighters scheduled for execution. The raid was filmed by a camera mounted in one of the Mosquitos. The footage showed the prison walls exploding, prisoners running through the breaches, guards firing machine guns. The BBC broadcast the footage within a week, proving to occupied Europe that the Allies could strike anywhere, even a prison 300 miles inside France. German commanders were horrified. If wooden bombers could hit a prison with that precision, what else could they hit? Gestapo headquarters? Command bunkers? They reinforced defenses around critical installations, pulled flak guns from the front lines, and assigned more fighters to defensive patrols. All because of wooden aircraft that flew too fast to catch. The Mosquito flew its last combat mission on May 21, 1945, hunting German U-boats off the coast of Scotland. By then, 7,781 Mosquitos had been built. They had flown 28,000 bomber missions, 39,000 fighter missions, and 15,000 reconnaissance missions. They had shot down 600 German aircraft, sunk 200 ships, and destroyed 1,500 locomotives. Loss rate across all missions, 1.2%. No other Allied bomber came close. Göring never forgave himself for dismissing the Mosquito. In a speech to German aircraft manufacturers in 1943, he said, "In 1940 I could at least fly as far as Glasgow in most of my aircraft, but not now. It makes me furious when I see the Mosquito. I turn green and yellow with envy. The British, who can afford aluminum better than we can, knock together a beautiful wooden aircraft that every piano factory over there is building, and they give it a speed which they have now increased again. What do you make of that?" German engineers tried to copy the Mosquito. They built the Focke-Wulf Ta 154, a wooden twin-engine night fighter designed to match the Mosquito's speed and altitude performance. It failed. The adhesive used to bond the wooden components degraded in humid conditions, causing structural failures. Only 50 were built before the program was cancelled. The British got it right. The Germans did not. After the war, the Mosquito remained in service with the RAF until 1955. It flew reconnaissance missions during the Berlin airlift, conducted surveillance flights over Soviet territory during the early Cold War, and served as a target tug for anti-aircraft training. The last operational Mosquito flight was on May 15, 1963, when a target tug variant retired from service with the Civilian Anti-Aircraft Cooperation Unit. 22 years after its first combat mission, the Wooden Wonder finally hung up its wings. Today, only 4 Mosquitos remain airworthy. 3 in the United States, 1 in Canada. Museums worldwide display static examples, preserved reminders of an aircraft that proved speed and innovation could defeat superior numbers and firepower. The de Havilland Aircraft Heritage Centre in London Colney, Hertfordshire, displays the prototype Mosquito W4050, the aircraft that first flew in November 1940 and convinced the Air Ministry that wooden bombers could win wars. The Royal Air Force Museum at Hendon displays a Mosquito B-35, painted in the colors of 109 Squadron, one of the light night striking force squadrons that bombed Berlin 36 consecutive nights. The National Museum of the United States Air Force at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio displays a Mosquito used by the 653rd Bombardment Squadron for weather reconnaissance ahead of 8th Air Force bomber streams. Every example tells the same story. An aircraft dismissed as useless became one of the most effective weapons of the war. An aircraft built by furniture factories became faster than purpose-built fighters. An aircraft crewed by 2 men destroyed more targets per loss than bombers crewed by 7. The men who flew Mosquitos never forgot. Squadron Leader Reggie Reynolds survived the war, flew 102 combat missions, received the Distinguished Service Order and the Distinguished Flying Cross. He died in 1987, age 74, buried with his medals and a piece of plywood from a Mosquito wing. His obituary in the Times called him the man who bombed Berlin in daylight and lived to tell about it. Flight Lieutenant James Gordon flew 89 missions, including the Berlin raid of January 30th, 1943. He died in 2003, age 86. His family donated his logbook to the RAF Museum, where visitors can read his entry for January 30th, 1943. Berlin, daylight, bombs on target. Göring not pleased. Group Captain Percy Pickard did not survive. He died at Amiens, age 28, killed after completing one of the most precise bombing raids in history. The French erected a monument at the crash site. It reads, "To Group Captain Pickard and Flight Lieutenant Broadley, who gave their lives to free our patriots from Amiens prison, February 18th, 1944. France will never forget." The Mosquito's legacy extended beyond the war. Its construction techniques influenced post-war aircraft design, proving that composite materials could match or exceed traditional metal airframes. Its speed over armament philosophy influenced jet fighter design, showing that the best defense was not more guns, but better performance. And its 2-man crew concept influenced modern strike aircraft design, proving that smaller crews could accomplish missions that previously required larger bombers. The F-111 Aardvark, the F-15E Strike Eagle, the Panavia Tornado, all followed the Mosquito's template. 2-man crews, high-speed precision strike capability. They were spiritual successors to an aircraft built from plywood in furniture factories during Britain's darkest hour. Geoffrey de Havilland, the Mosquito's designer, lived until 1965. He never built another aircraft as successful. When asked about the Mosquito's impact, he said, "We built what the Air Ministry said was impossible. We flew it where they said it could not fly. We proved that innovation beats tradition, that speed beats armor, and that 2 good men beat 7 average men every time." The Air Ministry had called the Mosquito useless. Göring had called it infuriating. But the men who flew it called it the Wooden Wonder, and they were right. It was a wonder. A wooden aircraft that flew faster than fighters, bombed more accurately than heavy bombers, and survived longer than any other bomber in the war. They called it useless, but it destroyed more German factories, sank more German ships, and killed more German fighters than any other British aircraft in World War II. And it did it all with 2 men in a wooden aircraft that piano factories built. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We are rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every week. Stories about wooden bombers that changed the war and proved the experts wrong. Real people, real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you are watching from. Are you watching from Texas, Germany, United Kingdom, Canada? You are not just a viewer, you are part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you are here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure the Mosquito and its crews do not disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you are helping make that happen.